Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and another 28-day check-in for a free random CTP has culminated. So you all have a free random CTP in your inventory if you logged in for 28 days straight. Hopefully you did. And so I decided to refresh and redo a video from about 4 or 5 months ago. It was March 4th. Just before some crazy changes to the game. The meta has actually shifted quite a lot since then, and I made a video on the top 5 picks for every single CTP. So I thought I would refresh that list we're now in August 2020, just before the Black Bolt Inhumans update. But now I'm going to go a step further, and I'm going to give you the top 10 picks for each CTP, just so that you have more information, and so we can have a little bit of a wider conversation. So here we go. Let me first open my CTP chest so you can see what I got, in case you're wondering. Okay, there you go. I got a CTP of Greed. Now, Greed is going to be the third CTP on this list. As always with these lists, you don't want to go ahead and do the spiciest ones first, because you want that watch time to go up. If the watch time goes up, YouTube recommends the videos to more people. We get more friends. The Marvel Future Fight community grows. We get more voices forcing Netmarble to fix the game the way that it should be, and sort of making things right and giving us the quality of life changes we need, more daily crystals, etc. So watch the video for a long time. Give it a like if you enjoyed it and if it helps you out, and then we'll get more friends to join us on this wacky journey in this mobile gaming landscape. So we're going to start it off with the CTP of Insight. We're not going to go in the exact same order that we went in last time. The CTP of Insight is a support CTP. Therefore, it's not going to deal tons of damage. There's no damage proc. And actually, this is one of the hardest CTPs to re-roll. And I actually get questions once in a while, people asking me, is this CTP broken? Because I re-rolled it 10 times and I'm only getting increased damage to superheroes, or I'm only getting increased damage to supervillains. It's just really annoying, and it's got a very low chance to roll both increased damage to heroes and villains. But because you get that, if you can get that roll, right, 15, I think it's 15 or 20% is the max rolls for those there, or for both. You sort of have like a mini support character, like a mini Shuri or a mini Taskmaster on your team. That's what makes it so good, right? And so my top 10 picks for the CTP of Insight go like this. We've got Colossus, Valkyrie, Phyla-Vell coming in third now, because she's an amazing support for so many universal types. She's got an amazing support passive. Then we've got Coulson, White Fox, She-Hulk, Taskmaster, Shuri, Black Cat, Ulysses, Claw. All of these characters have a support buff that will activate for anyone on the team. If you don't know what Black Cat's is, I believe she has to strike for you, but when she jumps in and strikes, she will reduce the buff effects, and I believe increase the debuff effects of the enemy that's being hit. You got to read her tier 2 passive to understand. It's called Bad Luck or something like that, but it's quite interesting, and it does work as a support passive, and so she's there primarily for ABX support, and that's why a lot of people give her a CTP of Insight. Moving on to the next one here. Well, we don't have these ones on the gambling list. We have to talk about Patience and Transcendence. I know they're not the most exciting, sexy CTPs, but they are worth something, and you will get them. So the CTP of Patience, which is the eye right there. Actually, you know what? Let me quickly find a character that has a CTP of Patience equipped, so that it's easier for you to see what is going on as far as... There we go. So yeah, the CTP of Patience... Actually, it's funny, I have one on Moon Girl instead of Transcendence. But anyways, sort of interesting here. So the CTP of Patience is essentially for characters who have summons for the most part. Not exclusively, but mostly it's for characters that have summons. Characters that are lower value. You're talking Shadowlanders and under for the tier list. And for the CTP of Patience, it's generally for characters who have a harder time staying alive. Characters who are squishier. Characters who don't have as many iframes, immunity, guard hit, invincibility, etc. So my top 10 picks for the CTP of Patience. Oh, by the way, this is the CTP you get from using boost points. Using boost points in any content except for GBR, besides that one day. But if you use boost points in Dimension missions or Epic Quest missions, you can get a CTP of Patience as a drop reward. It's random. So the CTP of Patience top 10 picks are Loki, Pimptron, Nightcrawler, Clea, Wave, Morgan Le Fay, Kitty Pryde, Squirrel Girl, Hela, and Supergiant. Now you can use Hela and also Wave as support type characters, so they could also get an insight because they have support properties, but Wave is very niche and Hela has to have her uniform on, so that's why they're better off just for Patience and just better off being shuffled off, not really doing much on your roster. Transcendence, on the other hand, unlike Patience, you lose the dodge and you gain ignore dodge. So Transcendence is generally for characters that can stay alive a little bit better, but also fall into the same category as the Patience characters. They have mostly summons. They're not very good. They're sort of Shadowlander type characters. and they don't have a lot of other value in the game. So my top 10 picks for the CTP of Transcendence are Moon Girl. So I have a Patience on Moon Girl, but I would rather give her a Transcendence because she hits harder and she can be useful in Shadowland. But anyways, my top 10 picks for Transcendence: Moon Girl, Kid Kaiju Crescent, Mr. Sinister, new addition there, Ultron, Hellstorm, Ulysses Claw, Hydro-Man, Magic, and then War Tiger. War Tiger is the only character that doesn't have any summons at all whatsoever, but he's just the fourth. He's sort of like the odd man out for the Warriors of the Sky, and I'll talk about the Warriors of the Sky in a little bit more detail later for other CTPs, but that's why he's there. And War Tiger is a very good new player-friendly character, and giving him a Transcendence is not the worst thing in the world. He can work with the damage proc, it's just hard. You're not going to give him a Rage, so yeah, he's not bad for a Transcendence. Again, some of these characters may be too good for a CTP of Transcendence, like tier 3 Crescent, or if you have a super maxed out Magic, but then again, for an average build with summons, they're not that great, and that's why that CTP is often recommended for them. Moving on to the next one, we have the one that I pulled, Greed. Greed, the way that it works, I've had it confirmed by Commander, who tests things out a lot in PvP. It will cycle between those two buffs. So you can see there's two damage proc buffs: 100% increased damage against speed universals, and then 150% damage against combat blast. It will cycle. So you'll have 5 seconds of speed universal. I believe the first proc is both, and then after that it will cycle speed universal and then combat blast. So if you're fighting against a combat or blast type team, you're only going to have that proc every 5 seconds, every 10 seconds. The other 5 seconds, you're going to deal much less damage. There's no cooldown. It cycles 5 and 5. There's no cooldown in between, but that's why your damage can dip and then spike a lot with the CTP of Greed, and it's got Guard Break, immunity, ignore dodge, and a small heal. This CTP is generally seen as a PvP CTP, but it is inferior. It's not as good as regen. It doesn't keep you alive as well as regen. For a lot of characters, it's worse than a damage proc obelisk, but it still has its uses, and it is still good for certain characters, and it does provide flexibility to have damage spikes that you may need for certain characters that can stay alive regardless. Okay, so the top 10 for the CTP of Greed, it's still a very weird CTP. I think it needs to be tweaked, honestly. It's not quite up to snuff compared to some of the other PvP CTPs. But anyways, the top 10 for Greed, in my opinion, are Jean Grey, Richard Rider Nova, number 2. I tested him out a lot with the Greed. He seemed to be quite good, and he has his own native penetration. That's what makes the CTP of Greed synergize well with him. Characters that don't have native penetration, the CTP of Greed just doesn't work for them. Number 3, Quicksilver, then Apocalypse, number 4, Silver Surfer, number 5, Deadpool, number 6, Colossus, number 7, Wolverine, number 8, Ant-Man, number 9, and then Captain America, number 10. That's the list. Again, you know, it's kind of a complicated CTP. It's kind of a strange CTP, but it has its uses. Coming up next, we have the CTP of Judgment. This is a entirely PvE CTP. This has increased elemental damage, so all of the characters I'm going to suggest are elemental types. Because it gives you a consistent buff, it gives you up to 200% elemental damage for 5 full seconds. It's sort of like a weaker version of a CTP of Rage, but only for elemental characters. You can kind of think about it like that. During the proc, when the increased damage, the elemental damage activates, you can press any number of skills. It doesn't just activate on one skill. So because of the CTP of Judgment's effect, you want to use characters that are harder to play with a traditional damage proc. So the poster child for being hard to play with a regular proc or a CTP of Energy or whatever is Luna Snow. There's too much spamming going on. There's skill cooldown resets and things like that. Luna is just a mess to try and proc with a regular obelisk besides a CTP of Rage. So that's why she's number 1 for a CTP of Judgment. But who comes next after Luna Snow? Well, you got Professor X. He's a massive headache to play without a Rage, and Judgment is like a mini Rage for him in that sense. Then you've got Beta Ray Bill coming in number 3. You got Iceman number 4, Blue Dragon number 5, Apocalypse number 6, Kid Omega number 7. He's actually a little bit annoying to play with a damage proc obelisk, and you will need him or someone like him for that Shadowland stage. So that's why I'm highlighting him there. And then we have got Emma Frost, Human Torch, and Psylocke. The CTP of Judgment, like I said, it's a small version of a Rage, but it's much, much, much worse than a Rage. So I don't want you to think that it's comparable. A CTP of Judgment is worse most of the time than a CTP of Energy as well, but it all falls under it all falls down, and it all comes down to the question of whether you can play consistently and proc consistently with a CTP of Energy. If you can, then a CTP of Energy will outperform a CTP of Judgment. But if you're missing most of your procs and you're not procking on the right skill, and if you don't know what procking is, I'll put a link in the card up there. in the top right hand corner to a video that I did about how to proc properly and how to see your proc happening. But if you don't proc properly, then a Judgment might actually be better for elemental damage dealing characters. But otherwise, they're both worse than a Rage 10 times out of 10. So there's that. Coming up next, we have the Egg. Now, in the original video, I didn't actually talk about the characters for the Egg, aka the CTP of Refinement. This is generally the worst CTP. I think this is actually worse than Transcendence and Patience, in my opinion, because it's a defensive PvP CTP, but it lacks guard break immunity, so you're going to be punished against most characters. Now, some characters have guard break immunity natively as a passive, so we are going to highlight those characters, like Obsidian, Ant-Man, but you can sort of get away with it on a character that has super armor, as long as you're not fighting a character or an enemy that has super armor penetration. It's kind of a weird situation. But anywho, the top 10 picks for the CTP of Refinement, keeping in mind that it's the worst CTP, and all 10 of these characters would be better off with the CTP of Regeneration, are Destroyer, Colossus, Obsidian, Ant-Man, She-Hulk, Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, Quasar, Green Goblin, and Volstagg. Now, of those characters, at least five of them off the top of my head I can see there, have Reflect. So that's going to be the big thing for the CTP of Refinement. It heals you and it gives you a guard hit, and that's going to allow you to reflect more and more damage. So, you know, you got Colossus and Destroyer, Luke Cage and Jessica Jones that all have Reflect, but then also you have Volstagg with a tiny bit of Reflect. Green Goblin just is very squishy without his uniform, and then he's got a combat type with high immunity on his combat with the combat uniform, the ultimate serum or whatever, so he can just be very annoying to kill in like a stall team for conquest or something like that with the CTP of Refinement. And then She-Hulk and Ant-Man and Obsidian have guard break immunity natively, but they may be better off. They're most likely better off with another CTP for PvP. Coming up next, we have one of the best CTPs for PvE in the game. This is the CTP of Energy, but some characters can make it work for PvP because they're just that spicy. So the top two for this list hasn't changed since the last 4 months. We have Sharon Rogers number 1 and Cable number 2, but then it starts to get really spicy. So brand new additions to the top 5 and the top 10 for the CTP of Energy. We got Beta Ray Bill, so good with that, you know, one-shot king canceling 354. We've got Black Widow, even at tier 3, she's doing tons of work for me with the CTP of Energy in both PvE and PvP. You got Mystique, Deadpool, Yelena Belova. Yep, again, either with her black uniform or her snow white uniform. And then you've got Dr. Octopus with his new uniform Awakened, Sabretooth because of the chain hit damage and the 3-5 sweetness combo, and then Odin 10th because of the chain hit again. So it's a little bit of a different list here for the CTP of Energy, but I feel like all of these characters benefit massively from a CTP of Energy, more so than most other characters, and they just put in so much work and they pull their weight tremendously in PvE content, World Boss, GBR, ABX, etc. Then we got the CTP of Authority. This is a PvP CTP for characters who have less HP. However, you can still slap it on characters who have a lot of HP and they will be super annoying. So the top 10 for the CTP of Authority: Silver Surfer, Thanos, Jean Grey, Apocalypse, Nimrod, Hulk, Odin, Doctor Strange, Scarlet Witch, Doctor Doom. So many characters that can revive, so many characters that can self-heal, damage reduction. It's a very common thread here because it is for PvP. Pretty straightforward. Not too much to talk about there. I don't know, by the way, if a character's natural or native accumulation interferes with or gets overwritten by this accumulation. We have no note, no information from the devs, just like we have no information from the devs whether the penetration from a CTP of Destruction will overwrite or synergize with a character's native penetration or penetration on one of their skills as a buff. We do have some anecdotal answers and evidence from customer service when you submit a support ticket, but we can't really trust them. Anywho, talking about the CTP of Destruction, this is mostly a PvP, but also kind of for PvE CTP for characters that don't have native penetration. So the poster child for awesome PvP action without penetration is, of course, Captain Marvel. Deadpool's an amazing second. Black Widow's a good third. Blue Dragon is a good fourth here because of the synergy with Sunbird to revive for things like Conquest and Timeline Battle. Because they revive with Sunbird's passive, they immediately have their Awakening skill available, and with the CTP of Destruction, they automatically have a 30% chance to penetrate and then just instantly kill you and one-shot you. So it actually turns into a bit of a synergy, especially if you bring all three of them in one match in a Rumble: Blue Dragon, Sunbird, and Shadow Shell. Yeah, and then they all revive at the same time, and you have 3 iframe with iframe ignore Awakening skills. that can penetrate, yeah, you're in for a lot of pain. That's why Shadow Shell and Sunbird are there at the bottom, 8 and 9, along with Thor. And then along the way, we have Yelena, Ant-Man, and Spider-Man. So there you go. That's CTP of Destruction. Moving on to the most popular PvE CTP in the game, the CTP of Rage, the one that I wish we had another way or another 2 or another 3 ways of getting free-to-play. I think free-to-play players need a couple more rages in order to balance out the scales between them and the sort of whale pay-to-win community. For the CTP of Rage, this is just your catch-all, tons of damage. You know, you have defense reduction. The boss's damage decrease, or their defense gets reduced. Crazy. And you can also spam for those 5 seconds that the damage increase activates, because it's a 5-second window. So, of course, number 1 for the CTP of Rage, Luna Snow. But then it gets kind of crazy. Number 2 is Odin, and number 3 is Silver Surfer. Their output in PvE is just so overwhelming. You have a level 60 Odin able to solo Galactus at level 60. Yes, his cost is tremendous, but you cannot ignore how crazy the synergy is between the CTPs of Rage stats and his base damage being so high and his accumulation. Number 4, we of course have Namor. Then we have newcomers Star-Lord, Professor X, and Mystique. Then we get Doctor Strange, because he is kind of a pain in the butt to work otherwise, and you basically can't work in PvE at a high level without a rage. And then we have Enchantress at number 9 and Jean Grey at number 10. Jean Grey is actually not the 10th best with a rage. I just put her there because she's a catch-all. You can give her a rage. She can carry you in low-level world boss and you know, slow Galactus and Master Mold stuff, but she can also do PvP. That's why I'm putting her there. Not that she's actually the 10th best. But then actually Enchantress, I'm kind of iffy putting her at number 9. So you could put Beta Ray Bill there at number 9 instead of Enchantress. I think that's a fine swap there for those two. And then last but not least, we have Regen. This is the number 1 PvP CTP. It's got Guard Break Immunity, max HP, and a heal, and a shield that will ignore Pierce, which is so powerful. We need more things like this in the game. We need skills or passives or leaderships like this in the game to counter the crazy Pierce meta, the crazy penetration meta of most characters nowadays. So top 10 picks for the CTP of Regen, pretty straightforward, just the best PvP characters in the game. Silver Surfer number 1, well, best PvP characters in the game as of now. Thanos no longer holds the crown. So number 1, we have Silver Surfer, number 2, we have Hulk, then Thanos, Jean Grey, Apocalypse, Nimrod, Doctor Strange, Wolverine, Odin, and then 10th would be Destroyer. You could argue for other characters in place of Destroyer. You could argue for Colossus. You could argue for quite a few others, but Destroyer is not a bad option there. And it just goes to show you that, you know, the CTP does add a lot of points to the character. Hulk, in this case, is better than Thanos for CTP of Regen because he not only gets the defensive properties from the CTP of Regen, but he also gets the offensive properties. He also gets a buff to his damage by having the CTP of Regen equipped because of how his damage is scaled. So let me know what you think of the list. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.